Okay. Is that any better? Oh, there it is. Good. Put this down a little bit. I guess I can. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak to you today. My name is Matt Lance. I'm the Vice President for Global Access at Bryant Christie. We are a international relations affairs company. We manage international agricultural issues. I've worked with Alan for over almost 20 years. We have offices in Seattle and Sacramento. We work on agricultural market access issues, marketing issues, technical issues, and you might know our chairman, Bill Bryant, who recently ran for governor. Our website is bryantchristie.com, and Alan has asked us to come today to speak to you about international markets, especially in Asia. And our discussion is going to be focused on the areas that we have worked with for the berry industries, and they're going to have basically three aspects. First, I'm going to talk about the market access issues that we have been undertaking to try to open the blueberry markets in different Asian markets and other market access issues. Secondly, we do a lot of work on MRLs, and so my presentation will be a nice follow-up to what Alan was saying regarding maximum residue levels of pesticides. And I'm going to go through these markets and talk about the different issues that you might face when you're exporting regarding MRLs. Then finally, our company has done 3 studies in different Asian markets on blueberry market access through the state block grants at WSDA. And Eric is going to, did that research and is going to be reporting on some of the market access opportunities there for both fresh and processed products. So with that, I'd like to start with what we are all trying to avoid, at least on the pesticide MRL issue. This is a photo of California strawberries, and it was taken in Taiwan a few years back. They had an MRL violation in Taiwan, and this is the type of reaction they got. So I know MRLs can be somewhat dry, but they can be very important. You don't want this to happen. And so the blueberry industry and the raspberry industry are dedicating a lot of resources to try to make sure that we have MRLs established in foreign markets that are at acceptable levels, so you never end up in this situation. So with that, I'm going to go through a series of, are we good? Yeah. Is it just too close to this? Is that any better? Test? All right. So with that, I'm going to go through a series of Asian markets, do a quick history of the market access issues, talk about their general pesticide MRL policies, and then provide additional information where we've done those studies. So we're going to start with Korea. So Korea is a $16 million market for frozen blueberries, $5 million for dried, and $4 million for fresh. Now, all of those fresh blueberries from the United States are currently coming from Oregon. In a strange twist, when the market was opened a few years back, it was only open for the state of Oregon, a mistake in retrospect from our perspective. So we are working to try to add fresh blueberries to that from Washington State and from California as well. It really shouldn't be too technical of an issue. The pest profiles are fairly similar to what we have in Oregon. It's just a matter of trying to get the Koreans to agree to basically apply what's been applied in Oregon to Washington State and to California. The Korean government has responded that they have resource issues and there's several things they need to work on first, and they need to improve the Oregon access. So we have been focused on the Oregon access issues. There are annual audits and things that are going to be a real challenge if they're applied to Washington State. And so we're hoping to get all of those fixed. So once the market is officially opened, it will be a lot easier for you. There was a bilateral negotiation in Seattle over Labor Day week. The Koreans did want to see blueberries, and so we did take them to a blueberry farm out by Wenatchee. They were also looking at the cherries in Wenatchee. And so it certainly is on, Washington State is certainly on their radar screen. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. next week for some free trade agreement talks with Korea. They have follow-up where there's quarantine talks, and we're again going to be raising the Washington issue at that point. On MRLs, Korea is the country we really need to focus on MRLs. Right now they have a system that has national Korean MRLs, and then it goes to Codex International MRLs. That's all going to change in 2 years. In 2 years, you need to have a national Korean MRL for blueberries and raspberries. So we are working on the blueberry side to establish those MRLs, because if they're not in place at that time, you're going to ship and you could have problems. Let me give you an example of a problem. This is from the California cherry industry. 5 years ago, the cherry industry had a single violation, one shipment, and as a result, they fell off the preferred testing list, and all California cherries for the last 5 years have been tested at elevated levels because of that single violation. So not just the shipper, the entire industry. Now, one of the things we're going to be discussing next week is trying to lower that. So if there is a problem, it only affects the shipper and not an entire industry, but it's something to watch. A worse situation happened with Philippines bananas last year in Korea. They had an MRL violation, and there was video of people taking bananas off the shelves in Korea saying these are dangerous, unapproved bananas. It was a real crisis for the banana industry, and there were no bananas in Korea for a couple of weeks as a result of this. So MRLs need to continue to be taken seriously, and we're certainly watching the Korea situation very closely. Korea is one of the markets. We did do a study, so I'm going to have Eric talk a little bit about what we found in our Korean market access study.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to bounce back and forth a little bit because we did 3 market studies. Matt's going to go into a number of other markets beyond the ones that we did for the research work. But I just wanted to begin by giving a shout out to my friends from WSDA that I see in the back of the room. Matt mentioned it in the beginning of his remarks. This project, it was a 3-year block grant from the state specialty crop block grant program that funded the Blueberry Commission to take a more in-depth look at 3 different target markets for really what the market potential is in those markets for all forms of blueberries from the state. So fresh, frozen, dried ingredients. I see Rebecca in the back there, and Rebecca Weber from WSDA. She actually traveled with Alan and I on to one of the markets, India. I'll cover that one in a little bit. This first one is Korea. This is the most recent. Actually, I see that the slide is a little cut off on the bottom. I don't know if that's something that can be fixed, but I'll keep going. But Korea is the most recent study that we did. We completed it just earlier this year in June. The market visit that was paired with that study took place in March. I went over to Korea with a couple of industry members from the commission. We met with importers, retailers, food manufacturers to explore the opportunities in that market. You can see here just a quick summary. The studies are all available from the commission. They're all 20, 30-page reports. They include even MRL analysis for each of the countries. So if you're interested, you can probably get them. Maybe they're online as well. The quick message on Korea and why it ties into Matt's remarks is that fresh, I think, is going to be important. Fresh market access to growth opportunities for Washington State in that market. Blueberries are certainly well known. There's a lot of interest. There's high demand for blueberries. Because of that, the local industry is even growing. But imports are also, significant. And Chile opened that market before the United States did. Canada's in there as well. And so, their exports are continuing to go up and up and up. It's a good market for fresh product, and as those volumes increase, the prices go down, and it makes them a bit more available. But in other areas, because blueberries have been in demand for a long time, the market does kind of appear to be a little bit saturated in certain areas. IQF frozen's been big in Korea. all the retail chains do have sections. They have a variety of product from different producers of bags of IQF blueberries sold at retail, product from Oregon, product from Washington for sure. Chilies in there as well with the same thing. Because it's fairly well established in retail already, I think there is interest to build sales and build demand with marketing programs. That's really the purview of the U.S. High Bush Blueberry Council and is not really part of our work and certainly not part of our ongoing work. But there is an opportunity to build that, I think. But in terms of establishing the presence in the channel, it's already there. Dried is little used in Korea. They prefer frozen for different food manufacturing purposes. The U.S. does tend to dominate the dried blueberry supply. So again, I think with some marketing efforts, there may be a chance to build upon that. And I know that the Washington Blueberry Commission does have now somebody stationed in Seoul to kind of drum up trade leads related to Washington fruit, Washington blueberry specifically. Ingredients, there are people actively marketing and supporting ingredient sales for Washington State in that market as well. And I think there is some interest, but awareness of those products and how to use them is a lot lower. So that's maybe another area to focus on. What's kind of missing from the very bottom here is just this kind of summary statement that you'll see on each of my slides, which is, from my take on visiting the market, the real primary growth opportunity, I think, is to get access for fresh product. I think that will help generate awareness and interest in the state of Washington fruit, blueberries. That will help maybe reinforce interest in IQF and dried. And then the marketing efforts, I think, need to pick up if there's an interest in developing that market. High Bush Blueberry Council is active there. I'm a little less familiar with exactly what they do with their resources there, but that's certainly something to explore. This next slide is just, I know it's hard to read, but this is just a quick, I only put it on here in the event that this presentation is made available on paper or online later. You can take a look at it, but it does show you 5 years worth of imports to the Korean market of blueberry products in different forms. And you can kind of see where the U.S. stacks up against others. Anyway, just you'll see this slide on the other markets as well.
Okay, I'm going to move over to Japan. Japan is a country where we ship $10 million worth of frozen blueberries, $5 million of dried, and $5 million of fresh. So we have market access for fresh blueberries in Japan. That's good news because Japan is notoriously difficult to open. So Japan has a reputation for only accepting very high quality fruit. One of the issues about market access into Japan is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So that was the trade agreement that both candidates ended up coming out against. It is now unlikely to be passed. For blueberries to Japan, that's bad news because the results would have been that the Japanese tariffs on blueberries would have been eliminated. This also would apply to Vietnam. Those were the two countries where ag tariffs were going to fall significantly. As far as Japan MRLs, there's a large MRL list in Japan. They've been in place since 2006. There's a default tolerance of 0.01. Our current focus is getting new MRLs into Japan when something new is registered. They do extensive testing and they have strict violation policies. An example of that is from several different agricultural groups: potatoes, lettuce, almond, raspberries has had a violation in Japan, not Washington raspberries, but a raspberry violation. And then right now, celery is having an issue. If you have a violation in Japan, it's serious. It doesn't really end up as much in the newspapers, but they demand an entire, your farm has to explain what happened, why you applied this chemical, why the residue exceeded the Japanese tolerance, what's being done. And if there's a second violation, an entire industry can be tested and held. That's only happened a few times. It hasn't happened recently. To get back onto preferential testing, you need to do 60 clean samples. So if I'm going to advise you as shippers to Asia, the markets that you're going to want to really look at for MRLs because of violations are Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. Those are where we have the most violations and where there are challenges. So take Japan seriously. I'm going to move over to China. China, we do ship $2 million worth of frozen blueberries, $1 million for the dried. No fresh, although some fresh comes in through gray channels in Hong Kong. Market access into China for fresh blueberries is a high priority for the industry, both Washington State and for the national industry. They are seeking market access for all relevant blueberry producing states. There was a negotiation between the United States and China in Chicago about a month ago. I attended that, and surprise, surprise, the Chinese actually came out and said, this is something that we're interested in working with you on. Normally, China's response is, you know, we've got other things, and it's very much a zero-sum game. The reason we know that there's some interest in China is that they have come back since that meeting and have provided us a list of 9 pests of concern. Now, typically the way China works is they do a giant pest risk assessment, and then you try to knock out pests, but they came out with 9 pests. I don't know if that means we're going to skip the PRA process and go straight to a market access negotiation, but at the moment, USDA's Animal Plant Health Inspection Service is reviewing the 9 pests, and we're going to be making a submission back to the Chinese on those pests. And I work with Alan and other experts on how to respond to those pests. China MRLs, this is actually a photo I took out of my hotel room in Beijing the other day. That's what China, at least what Beijing looks like at the moment. It's pretty smoggy. They do have a limited MRL list in China. They are expanding it significantly. There's no real system to get an import tolerance. You have to do a full registration there. But importantly, there's very limited, if any, residue testing. I've only ever heard of 2 violations in China for an MRL violation. 4 Philippine bananas, one more time this April, had an issue. I think the reason for that is, you know, there are obviously pesticide issues on Chinese products, and they don't want to draw attention to it. They could change that policy, but for now, when you're shipping to China, we certainly are looking at trying to get Chinese MRLs, but it's not the same level of scrutiny as you're going to face in other markets in Asia. This is another study that we've done, so I'll turn it back to Eric for some of the marketing side.
So this one was actually the first of the 3 that we did. So it's a little dated at this point. The market visit that took place for this study was actually back in 2014. The study then was completed. It was kind of at the end of 2014. The study was completed in spring of 2015. So some of the numbers on the next slide, the market, you know, has had a couple of additional years of trade. I have not picked up to see, you know, what the latest figures are, but the story in China is fairly similar to what I mentioned on Korea. Fresh market access, I think, is going to be vitally important for, you know, certainly growth of exports from this state, but also in maybe reinforcing interest in IQF or dried or other processed products that are available from the industry here in the state. You know, you can see here, Chile is a dominant exporter to that market. Their exports have been increasing significantly. Blueberries are of tremendous interest to the Chinese. You know, certainly the health benefits are well known. As a result, it's a commodity that the Chinese government has been emphasizing for their own local production and has been investing heavily in increased local production. There's also wild production as well that often feeds into the processing sector. So, you know, there is strong competition locally, but imports are really valued for quality. I think, you know, it is a high priority. Matt said, that still works. Battery's dead. Test, okay, back up. You can see here just same organization of the slide as the Korea, you know, fresh. Chile is fairly dominant. Canada's in as well, beginning to ship. Peru. Frozen, the U.S. has been competitive, but at least recent figures I looked at, Canada and Chile are ahead. It did seem, you know, when we visited that market, you know, the online retail chains are incredibly important. The growth in the online retail sector has been huge, and a lot of those online retailers had not really yet begun focusing on IQF frozen product. I do expect that to change, and maybe it has been changing over the last couple of years since we visited. Initially they were largely set up around first perfecting fresh produce distribution, and it's become a huge channel for imported products. So I do think that that's where there is some opportunity for IQF is through that online retail channel. Again, it would be worth maybe taking a look to see whether any of those online retailers are now carrying IQF blueberries, and really maybe marketing and working that channel. Again, that would be more the role of the HBC, U.S. High-Bush Blueberry Council, but maybe worth inquiring about that. Dried is where the U.S. has been the leading supplier, but it's a fairly modest growth potential, I would say. There is dried blueberries that come out of the local industry, and as I said, they have fairly large wild blueberry production that a lot of that goes into dried product. Limited awareness of ingredients back then. That was 2 years ago. Maybe that's changing a little bit. So again, that summary line at the bottom, for this market, it really does, fresh market access, I think, will be vital to really positioning Washington State in the market among the importers, among food manufacturers that may buy from importers, and certainly retailers as well. And then maybe looking at the IQF channel through online retail. This is the slide I had for the last one as well. This is just the numbers we had pulled back at the time of the study that just shows where we are for blueberry imports into China. These numbers may have changed a bit by now.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go through a couple of other slides, a couple other markets. These will go a little more quickly. Hong Kong is a market at $1 million for frozen blueberries, $2 million for dried, $5 million for fresh. I'm sure some of that fresh crosses the gray channel into China. We do have fresh access there. On MRLs in Hong Kong, they do have a national MRL list. We work to get blueberry MRLs and raspberry MRLs there. We need additional MRLs. They're not establishing additional MRLs in Hong Kong because of a fight with China. It's actually, to get a new MRL in Hong Kong, you actually have to have it approved by their legislature, and their legislature doesn't want to do anything that would help China. China wants MRLs in Hong Kong. So believe it or not, MRLs are actually a political fight in China. I've met a couple of times with the Hong Kong government on this. The important thing you need to know about Hong Kong is they are only testing against the MRLs they have established. So if you see a missing MRL in Hong Kong, they're not testing for it. If you see an established MRL in Hong Kong, that's the one you need to be watching for. I haven't seen any residue violations in Hong Kong this year on any product, so I don't think it's a high priority for them. Again, all of these MRLs are at globalmrl.com. Taiwan, we have fresh access, $2 million worth of fresh. We also ship frozen, $1 million of frozen, and $500,000 of dried cranberries. I've already mentioned that Taiwan MRLs are particularly challenging. They have a national MRL list. They don't have a default tolerance. I would say we have more U.S. residue violations in Taiwan than any other country, so be particularly careful when you export to Taiwan. Food safety is an important issue, and many MRL violations end up in the newspaper. Mostly, fortunately, they're now only a day story. They're not like that first photo I showed you, but certainly something to be watching for. Going to go over to a couple of other maybe markets you haven't considered quite as widely. Vietnam market access. Vietnam is a country of 89 million people. Most of them are young. They very much like the United States, and they like the quality of our products, and there's a growing middle class there. We've had minimal exports up till now, but we are seeking fresh market access into Vietnam. We've had several exchanges this year on this. They have a few pests of concern. We just got a letter back 2 weeks ago, and we're going to try to continue to address those pests of concern. We really don't have any MRLs issues in Vietnam at the moment. And when I say I'm working on these market access issues, I work directly with the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service on behalf of Washington State, but I'm also coordinating my efforts with the National Council as well. So we're not all getting sideways on these issues, so we try to coordinate. Philippine market access, similar to Vietnam, very large market that's untapped. 98 million consumers. I was in Manila in March. It's absolute chaos, but they have a strong infrastructure for imports. They love U.S. products. There are many U.S. agricultural products there. We have minimal minimal shipments today. We're seeking market access for fresh blueberries in the Philippines as well. And there are no MRL issues. Australia and New Zealand, obviously a very strong market, a very wealthy market. We are trying to establish market access there, but we're not making a lot of progress due to resource issues among their governments. We keep having negotiations with them saying, you know, how long. They say we're going to get to it, but they haven't been able to at this point. On MRL issues, there are national MRLs in Australia. It's pretty easy to get new MRLs in Australia, so if there are things missing, we can get them. In New Zealand, they use the International Codex standards. We'll do a quick report on India, the India study.
The India study was the second one that we did, completed in December of 2015. I would say of the three markets, this is the most nascent of the markets in terms of current consumption interest and demand for blueberries. There is interest in awareness of the health benefits, but very little product going in there, imported product going in there. You can see this line, 100 metric tons combined for fresh, frozen, and dried. You know, that's, I think, expected to change. There is fresh fruit going in, fresh blueberries going in from the United States, little bits of, you know, small quantities of the other products as well. But I think in this market, there really is going to need to be a marketing effort. Blueberries are not native. They're less well known. I think there needs to be a stepped up marketing effort to develop that market further for Washington State products.
Okay. So here's my conclusion. Washington State is well positioned, both in your location to export to Asia and also with your product. There's growing interest in blueberries and raspberries, the health issues associated with them. China coming back and expressing interest is certainly a very positive development. There's increased demand and interest, increased economies in those different markets. The Trans-Pacific Partnership failure will hurt us in Japan to an extent, and also in Vietnam. If I were to guess which markets are going to open first for fresh, I would think that we can probably do Vietnam first, maybe the Philippines, and then move on to China and Korea, depending on resources in both of those markets. Australia and New Zealand seem to be a little bit slower. And then, as Alan mentioned earlier, know your MRLs. Be careful with them, especially in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, where you're most likely to have issues. With that, I probably have a couple minutes to spare.
Hi. It's two questions. I don't know whether you folks answer it or Alan does, but if you're shipping fresh by what is it, CO2, you gas them to give a longer shelf life, and the other one is does by drying blueberries, does it the resistance of MRLs, does that drying make a difference?
Okay, Alan, do you want to answer the first one? Or you could probably answer both, actually.
Does the drying change? I could say frozen doesn't work, but does drying not work? And the other one is gassing that fresh berries for shelf life as they're going in the container across the.
I don't know about, I'm not the right guy to ask about conditioned atmosphere for blueberries. I know that people are doing it, and that you can change the atmosphere, increase the shelf life if you put them in containers and ship them. But that's not my area of expertise. On dried blueberries, sometimes drying them can destroy residues. On ones that are not heat labile, it can actually increase the residues when you reduce the moisture. All right.
Other questions?
Alan alluded to potential MRL issues with herbicides. Do you see any issues along those lines? Is that something we need to be looking at?
I would say traditionally, herbicides have not been a major concern for MRLs. There are often MRLs established at very low levels for herbicides. So what I would do is just check the US MRL if there's one associated with the herbicide, and then look at globalmrl.com to see what the corresponding MRL is in a foreign country. If it's harmonized, you know you don't have to worry about it, or if it's less restrictive. If it's more restrictive, you're still unlikely to probably have an issue with the herbicide, but at the same time, you might just want to look and be aware. Yeah. Okay.
There was a lot of talk earlier about separating or the West Coast and having separate deals for going into the Asian countries. Is the emphasis now more on the entire U.S. going into these, or are there opportunities for the West Coast to go it alone?
It depends on the market. China, there's definitely a push from the national industry to have all of the states approved. On Korea, the market access request is just for the West Coast at the moment, and so it depends on the different markets. The one big difference between the West Coast, obviously, and the others is blueberry maggot. We don't need to worry about blueberry maggot, and what typically will happen then is we'll have to see how the negotiations go. If we get hung up on blueberry maggot and there's not an opportunity to fix that issue, then we might say, all right, well, the other states would go first. But hopefully we can address any blueberry maggot issues, and we can basically, you wouldn't have to have any concerns about it, but the other states could do whatever actions they needed to take on that. So that's how it works. Eric wanted me to mention on globalmrl.com, this is a database that our company does run. It is anyone in the United States can have free access to it. This is sponsored by USDA and EPA. You just sign up with your email and a password, and you can go in and use it. So there's no charge to use it, but it's certainly the best information you can get on MRLs.
I just want to follow up on Tom's question. You might think it would be controversial if they're lining up the West Coast to go into South Korea and not the rest. And this stuff gets hammered out at places like the U.S. High Bush Council, North American Blueberry Council. But here is the Faustian bargain that Eastern production regions had to come up with. And that is, they could wait years and years and years for everybody to get into South Korea, or they could put the West Coast in first to send blueberries over there sooner. So the catch is, if we don't send it west, we're going to send it back east towards them. And they are very happy for us to send as much as possible west. And so it's that concern about splitting us off is surprisingly not controversial. We don't get these guys very often. So now is a good time to ask them questions about blueberries and raspberries,
Cranberries.
ask them something.
Hey, great talk, thank you. I have a question going back to China. You mentioned MRLs, they're not really looking for them. I mean, basically, what's the outlook for the next 5 years on MRLs in China? I mean, you just ship without too much worry, or what would be your approach?
Who spoke? It was like God. Oh, okay. Oh, there you are. Okay, thanks. All right, this is where I have to be really careful, because I'm not a lawyer and I don't get legal advice. So what I don't want to do is have people come back and say, Bryant Christie said you could ship to China, and now I've had an issue. I can only tell you our experiences to date. We do MRLs for a lot of folks, and we follow this very closely. And I'm also very close to the folks dealing with MRLs in the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. It hasn't been an issue to date. I'm aware of one hop violation that came from Germany 2 years ago. That was for DDT, so I don't know where that came from. And then I'm aware of the banana issue that was for a valent product from the Philippines that was in April. In general, in China, rules on this type of stuff can vary port to port. And so the port officials can do testing and take actions or not take actions. I am aware of Chinese rejections for food additive issues. I am aware of Chinese rejections for contaminant issues. So other types of issues that they've tested for, they have had rejections for. They have not had rejections for pesticides. And I can only think that is at the moment a conscious decision for them because of their issues they've had with their products exporting to other markets. That being said, China could flip the switch in a moment and say, guess what? We're going to start testing pesticide residues. If we get into a trade war with China, when there was the melamine issue and the dog food issue, that's when we started having problems with food additives and contaminants because they wanted to say, well, US product isn't so clean either. It's a political decision. So they could change at a whim. The assurance I often give to groups when they're exporting to China is, you're in the same boat that everyone else is in. The soy industry, the apple industry, the potato industry, everyone is shipping to China. Everyone is missing MRLs in China. And so far, none of us are having big issues. If it changes, and this is where I work with Henry and I work with Alan, if it changes, we would tell people immediately, China's starting to do testing for pesticide residues, and we would try to let people be aware. And also, every year that we go without this problem, the more MRLs get established in China. Most of them are being set at the international codex level, which is a good level. And so we're making progress there. So that's the best answer I can give you on China.
Speaking of codex, is there good progress being made on harmonizing these things worldwide? Is that a long ways off? Yeah, I know.
The reason I laugh is I just was at a meeting at the World Trade Organization in Geneva 2 days on that exact question. So I'm sure you guys are a little hungry, so I won't give you 2 days worth of an answer. The codex are the international standards. Some countries simply defer to codex standards, which is nice. Some countries use codex standards to supplement a national list, like Singapore has a limited list, then they'll use the codex standards. But even countries like Korea and China, where they're establishing a national list, often will look at the codex number because it's seen as objective and try to harmonize with codex. So codex plays a good role there. And there are efforts all over the place to try to have harmonized MRLs established so people aren't looking at the same data and coming up with different numbers. It's just so much easier for importers and for shippers and for growers if the numbers are consistent across the board. It's a goal. It's not something that is necessarily going to always be achieved, but certainly something we're spending a lot of time working on. All right.
I think we're a little over time, so we're going to wrap this up. Let's give these guys a hand to show appreciation.
It's lunchtime again, so we'll take an hour and a half break. There's, I don't know what's on the menu, but there's Mexican food in the northwest corner and Indian food in the southwest corner. 1:30.